Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachahakodash. Double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders at Great Millstone who rule well. Peace and salutations, as always, to the elect. And I wanted to do a response to this video uploaded by the elder Karatazah, all right, of the GMS branch at Las Vegas, Nevada. All right, as you can see his page here, GMS Vegas 144, reloaded. Subscribe and be edified. His other pages have been taken down without explanation, just out of the blue. So make sure you subscribe to his page so that, he can build his page back up and eventually go live. Now, the title of the video that I will be responding to is The Process of Selling Out from the Horse's Mouth. And this is a good video. Make sure you watch it, look it up. In the video, he brought up an interview that was done between a Bishop Nathaniel as he's on a particular podcast, and it's very telling. And I'm not so much going to address that. What I wanted to address and edify on is this particular post that he has up from the Genesis Israelites. As we told you, these men have taken the bag. They've sold out. All right. And I believe that they're preparing to teach a doctrine that the so-called white man isn't the Edomite. Now, I could be wrong, but as I look at where they're going with this particular doctrine here, it makes sense. Okay. Now, if they, never do that, ultimately the bottom line is that they are teaching the doctrine of devils. Okay. Putting, stumbling blocks before the children of Israel. All right. In the form of all of these wayward doctrines, all of this rebellion, all of this apostasy, all of this confusion. As we are in the time of the end, they've left off from prophesying. Now they want to change everything that they once taught. All right. And come up against the true teachings of Yahweh Bashim Yahushua, because somebody's telling the truth. And the thing is this, the new song has already started to be sung. It's not going to start being sung, with an individual who at the very end, comes to these epiphanies and just comes with all of these wayward doctrines. And now that's the truth of the matter. No, the new song has already been sung, and it's being sung in its perfection, as the scriptures tell us, to play skillfully upon the harp. Okay. So what we see from these individuals is something that was prophesied a long time ago. The book of Jude warned us. Now, as you can see here, what I'm going to address, which who cares of their angle? The bottom line is that they're going off. The serpent, all right, speaking of the serpent in the garden, was a Canaanite man, not Satan. Friday night, we going in. All right. All praise to the Most High. All right. And, no one teaches that the serpent in the garden was Satan himself. All right. The serpent in the garden possessed the spirit of Satan. Okay. To do his will in the garden and disrupting order. The same thing that the serpent is doing in the earth today. Okay. And now we're going to go into this because it's crazy that I had a lesson, sort of centered around this that I've been sitting on that I never really went into. I'll leave some of what I had for that lesson out, but I did want to edify on this because the clear understanding and answer is that the Canaanites weren't even a nation at the time that, Adam and Eve and the serpent are, on the scene and mentioned. Okay. The Canaanites were born, on the ark and came off of the ark, right, with his father Ham. Okay. And we're going to get into that, but I did want to bring out some history. I wanted to bring out, some understanding and show you that the scriptures for a fact link the biblical Edomites, all right, to that old serpent. All right. And ultimately, we know that pursuant to the book of 2 Thessalonians, the second chapter, as we'll get it later, there is a man who would come to do the working of Satan. Okay. And in this day and age, that is the biblical Edomites. Okay. Now, of course, there's other people who, even our people who do the bidding of Satan. All right. But who comes to bring that energy to where the earth is guided under the influence of wickedness, evil, sin, rebellion, do as thou wilt? It's the biblical Edomite. Okay. He's the ruler of the revival of Rome. He's the ruler of this final empire, the revival of the fourth beast. Okay. And he will rule, all right, via blasphemy, wickedness. All right. And everything wrong. Okay. But we will show you that he did get a lot of his wisdom from the Canaanites. All right. As he came into power as the Greeks and the Romans. Now let's start, with a scripture here real quick. In 2 Timothy 3:13, it says, but evil men and seducers will wax worse and worse. All right. Deceiving and being deceived. And as the scriptures say, the deceived and the deceivers are the Lord. All right. They're of the Lord. So, the Heavenly Father ordained these seducers to do what they do, to seduce others unto their destruction and to ultimately show those who have the truth of the matter. Okay. And also to, enlighten those who are following these men who may be of the elect, that these guys are off. All right. And to repent and come into the true knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of Yahweh Bashim Yahshua via the true doctrine, which is being taught by the apostles of Great Millstone. All right. And the men under them and our true affiliates. Okay. And even, some who, may not, want to identify with Great Millstone or may be mad, but when you listen to them, they're pretty much teaching the same doctrine. Okay. Now, evil men and seducers are waxing worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. See that? Deceiving and being deceived, man. And the scriptures tell you seducing spirits marks, okay, the end times. It's in the same chapter. Okay. 1 Timothy 4:1. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter time some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. Let's look up this word seducing spirit or seducing. So many are departing from the faith, giving heed to seducing, planos, right? Wandering, roving, misleading, leading into error, vagabond. See, and Peter warned us, all right, that these kind of men will come around. Let's get the book of 2 Peter's 2. So you've all been warned. And the crazy part about the warnings of the scriptures is that men can do exactly what the warning warned against and not even know that they're doing it. 2 Peter 2:1. But there will false prophets also among the people, even as there shall be false teachers among you. See that? Who privily shall bring in damnable heresies, even denying the Lord that brought them. You don't have to worship Yahweh Shai. Okay, we're going to be under the priesthood of Aaron when we get into the kingdom. Right? And many more evil doctrines, man. Okay? Yahweh Shai after 1,000 years is going to, have to, go back to the spirit world and then be born back into the earth through a father and a mother. Even denying the Lord that brought them, and shall bring upon themselves swift destruction. And many shall follow their pernicious ways. I was speaking with a brother. He was like, man, it's crazy how, these dudes actually have people who like these videos and follow them. And, this is all prophetic. See, this is all the doing of the Lord, man. Nothing is happening in the planet Earth, even within this great awakening, Israel, right, that the Heavenly Father doesn't want to happen. We just have to, be, obedient to his will. We can't be offended by his will. Now, in the flesh, sometimes it's like, what is this all about? You're like, why? And, We all go through it. But the Lord is telling us, right? Many will follow their pernicious ways, by reason of whom the way of truth shall be evil spoken of. And through covetousness shall they with vain words, well put together speeches, eloquent speech, make merchandise of you, right? Selling prayer, selling Hebrew names, selling hope, right? If you sell in prayer, you're selling hope. Okay. Charging for breakdowns, all kind of shit, right? So they're hats, hoodies, wave caps with fringes on it, sandals, different, all kind of merchandise, right? Charging you for, marriage counseling and sessions and, giving you that, a number so that you can text them for, personal advice, that comes with the package for $500 a month. This is what these individuals did, right? Whose judgment now of a long time linger not, and their damnation slumber not. So the judgment of these guys is getting ready to come. Okay. So many are going to follow their pernicious ways. And one of the marks of these individuals is them making merchandise of you. Let's look at the word merchandise. Right. And like Jude said, I wanted to write unto you of the common salvation we share, but in this lesson, in this epistle, I must address these individuals. Now, the word for merchandise,
Strong's G 1710, emparuomai.
Right, just like in Oakland where I grew up, they had Emporium Capwell, which I believe that store is done, but that was a famous store. I don't know if it was anywhere else, but that goes back, to the Greco-Roman Empire. It says trading, to travel for business, to traffic, trade of a thing, to import, sell, deal in, to use a person or thing for gain. See, make merchandise. Okay. That's pretty much what these guys are doing. Okay. Now, to get to the purpose of the video, I wanted to address this post, as you can see. All right. Pre-Genesis mode, the Genesis Israelites coming with more confusion. Now out of nowhere, they're teaching that the serpent in the garden was a Canaanite man. All right. Not Satan. And to tune in now, there was a video his ex-leader, Alazar, did, and he said that Deacon would always come with these crazy breakdowns, and he would have to, ultimately tell him, like, look, man, that's too much. You know what I'm saying? So now that he's no longer under the, he no longer has a head or someone who he has to, come to first with breakdown. He's just going to bring them all out. All right. And we believe that, these devils are working with them to bring about confusion. All right. We believe they've been infiltrated. All right. Now, do we have the proof? No, but the scriptures say you should know them by their fruits. And really, it doesn't matter. You sold out in the spirit anyway. All right. You are putting a stumbling block before the children of Israel. OK, causing them to shipwreck in the faith. But whoever's taken by it is taken by it. All right. So the serpent being a Canaanite makes no sense. The serpent in the garden was a man. All right. Or a nation of people as well, because at this time, a lot of people are under the impression that Adam and Eve were the first two people on the planet Earth. All right. And that's just not true. Now, Adam represents the first man to receive the wisdom associated with how to govern the earth and the laws. And he then, passed that instruction down to Eve. Right. But, Adam himself told you that a man would have to leave his father and mother. All right. And cling unto his wife. That concept was known about even back then. Men were being fruitful and multiplying. OK, before Adam was given the order, the commandment, because that's what Adam represents, the first high priest on the earth. And the Lord dealt with him by breathing unto him the breath of life. All right. He was alive before that, but, he became living once he received the instruction. Okay. And, he ruled out of the garden eastward in Eden, but there was a particular way he and his descendants were to live through Abel. Okay. Now, when you look up this word serpent, and when you read about the trees in the garden, it represents philosophies. It represents nations of people. All right. There's various scriptures you can go to where the Lord likens men unto trees. Okay. Trees in a garden represents the nations of people on the earth. Their fruit represents what? Their philosophies. Okay. There's many scriptures we can get, brothers can post some and, be looking at the comment board for those precepts, but I'm just going to, hop right into it. Cause we have lessons going into this chapter and, all, other, Genesis 4, Genesis 3, this is a history I love to go into. Because this is a part of the Torah, the foundation of our belief, all right, which was given unto Moses as we were exodus out of Egypt. He supped with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights, and the Lord gave him the understanding of, our origin in the heavens, our history, what happened with Adam, and the history that he needed to know to link to his mission. All right. Now, the word serpent here, all right, Genesis 3:1. Now, the serpent was more subtle than any of the beasts of the field. And the scriptures tell you that, men are like beasts, right? And again, when you deal with it, you had the sons of God, you had the sons of men, you had the sons of the wicked. Those were the three classes of men on the earth at this time. There wasn't a Canaanite. Okay. Now, the word serpent, the serpent was more subtle than any of the beasts of the field. So the beasts represent, the nations of people. Okay. Because a serpent isn't a beast. Okay. A serpent is a reptile. Okay. When you look up the word serpent, right? When you look up the word serpent, right? Now the serpent, all right, you get the word nachash, right? Serpent, snake, right? But when you get into it, it's nachash. It says to practice divination, to divine, to observe signs, to learn by experience, to diligently observe, practice fortune telling. Now, do animals do that? To take as an omen, to practice divination, to observe signs and omens, enchantments, a whisper, magic spells. Do you believe in magic? To prognosticate, divine, enchanter, learn by experience. So this is describing a man, and nation of people on earth that possessed, all right, a very demonic, left-handed, all right, doctrine or philosophy or culture. Sort of like the same thing that's going on here, because Babylon the Great in Isaiah the 47th chapter is described with these very same characteristics. Okay, one that would dwell carelessly and be given unto pleasures, man. Trusting in their wickedness and their wisdom. Okay, but it said they would stand with enchantments and sorceries. Okay, they would have councils which dealt with astrologers and stargazers and monthly prognosticators. It's the very same thing that we see going on here with this serpent. Okay, which is a man. It's not talking about a snake, literally. And what this serpent was able to do was to bring about a philosophy, a way, fruits that will cause Adam to sin. As a matter of fact, this is the book of 2nd Esdras, the 3rd chapter. Speaking of Adam, I'll start at 5. And gavest a body unto Adam without soul, which was the workmanship of thine hands, and didst breathe unto him the breath of life, and he was made living before thee. And thou leddest him into paradise, which thy right hand had planted before the earth ever came forward. Okay. And unto him thou gavest a commandment to love thy way. So this was ultimately the the knowledge of good, right? It says, which he transgressed. So Adam transgressed, okay, through taking heed to this philosophy, through breaking the commandment. Okay, Adam was the first, all right, and these, Adamites, the sons of God, were the first to break the laws, right? It says, and immediately that appointeth death into him and his generations, of whom came nations, tribes, people, and kindreds out of number. Okay, so Adam was made to transgress, which when you deal with Adam, yes, is Adam, but also, all right, when you get Genesis, the 5th chapter, okay, 5:1, this is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day that God created man, in the likeness of God made he him. Okay. Male and female created he them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam. So Adam and his descendants were what? Made in the image of the Most High. Not all nations, right? They were the chosen. Male and female created he them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam in the day that they were created. Okay. So Adam also represents, all right, the sons of God, which of course the daughters as well. Okay. So, and that would, as you read, that would be through Seth, because Abel was slew by Cain. Okay. And then Enos, Canaan, and so forth, going through the Mahalalel, Enoch comes, and then eventually, Noah, right? Those were the sons of God. And the special thing about this particular chapter is it's highlighting those who stuck to the righteous way. All right. But many of our people fell away. All right. By following these other different philosophies, which came with the fall of Adam. Okay. So Adam, okay, was succumb, okay, to the philosophies. All right. To the wine of the serpent. As a matter of fact, the scriptures tell you in Sirach 21:2, flee from sin as from the face of a serpent. If thou comest too near it, it will bite thee. The teeth thereof are the teeth of a lion, slaying the souls of men. Okay, Sirach 25:15. There is no head above the head of a serpent, and there is no wrath above the wrath of the enemy. So the serpent was an enemy to the righteous seed. Okay, and the scriptures tell you, all right, which we'll tap into this later. This was told to the serpent after that whole fiasco, Genesis 3:15. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman. Now the woman, okay, symbolizes the righteous. All right, as the scriptures say, I have likened Zion unto a comely and delicate woman. The chosen seed is likened unto the Lord's woman, his wife, because he made a covenant with her. He made an agreement with her that she would stick to these ways. Okay, that's why the day is coming where he's going to put it in us. Okay, because sin is what constantly separated us from walking on the right path. So I will put enmity. This is what the Lord is telling the serpent, between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. What is this talking about? Is this talking about, actual serpent, arguing with a woman and, biting her on the heel? No, man, this is going into the history of the back and forth that would be of starting with Cain and Abel, but it would also, all right, and be fulfilled through Jacob and Esau. And we're going to tap into that. We're going to show you that this is a prophecy of the enmity, the hatred that would be between, the seed of, Cain and Abel, and the seed of ultimately Jacob and Esau. That's what this is speaking to. Okay? Because it would make more sense to tie the serpent to the seed of Cain than to tie the seed of the serpent, all right, or the serpent himself to the Canaanites, because the Canaanites weren't around as a nation back at this point, as we'll show you real quick. All right. And I say that about Cain because when you deal with Cain, he represents a murderer. But Cain it wasn't just Cain. He had a lineage. Okay. He had Cain was a nation. Okay. As you read Genesis, the 4th chapter, in the 17th verse, it gives you the understanding that Cain had a lineage. Now, where did Cain get his wife if it was just Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel? And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch. This is Enoch on the left-hand side. This is not the righteous Enoch you read about in Genesis, the 5th chapter. Some of the names are the same. And he built a city and called the name of the city after his son Enoch. They called their lands after their own names. Okay. And Enoch was born and begot Irad, Mahulel, Methuselah. All right. And these are, the sons of the wicked. You read Genesis, the 14th chapter. All right. And you read about the lineage of the wicked through Cain. And then you read Genesis, the 5th chapter, and it's telling you about the lineage of the righteous from Adam through Seth. See, so this is 2 separate lineages being established. All right. And you have to understand, by the time you get to chapter 6, they had mixed and mingled, and he's giving you the history of how the sons of God, mingle with the daughters of men. And pretty much as you get into it, bow to their idols, man. And that was a result of mingling amongst the heathen, of following customs that the Lord told you to stay away from. Okay. This is the first record of that amongst the chosen lineage. You see, and Cain, all right, was in the earth. Cain and his lineage was in the earth at the same time. All right. Adam and the righteous lineage through Seth, because Abel was slew, were on the earth. They were mixing and mingling. All right. Now, what I did was I typed in here real quick. All right. I asked, what did Flavius Josephus, which Flavius Josephus is an historian of the southern kingdom, the tribe of Levi, that was around during the Roman Empire. He has a lot of history in his writings that, we go to it just to get some history. All right. It's not, so say, scripture, but he does give you some good insight if it can be used through the Spirit, but you have to be discerning. It says Flavius Josephus actually gives one of the most detailed extra biblical accounts of Cain and his descendants. His version adds details not found in Genesis, especially about their character, their behavior, and what they introduced into the world. Okay. Josephus portrays Cain as evil from youth, exceedingly wicked, greedy for gain, violent. Okay. It says, he gathered companions in wickedness, taught men to rebel. Okay. He corrupted mankind. Cain and his seed corrupted, all right, the nations that were on the earth in that day, and they corrupted the sons of God as well. All right. Just as they are prone to do. All right. Those who possess this spirit corrupt, all right, our people. Okay. It says, introduced change into the simpler way of life, taught men to measure everything by force and wealth, turned people from innocence to wickedness, encouraged robbery, violence, and oppression. Okay. So in Josephus, Cain doesn't just sin, he becomes the teacher of sin, shaping early human society in rebellion against God. Okay. What did he say about Cain's lineage? Cain's descendants imitated his wickedness, became worse with each generation, grew bold in wicked practices, lived only for pleasure, violence, and gain, despised virtue and God. They filled the earth with corruption. They invented new forms of wickedness, lived in open lawlessness, perverted the earth with injustice, became oppressors over the rest of humankind. See, this is what happened. Our people learn these ways. See that? So it would make sense to link the serpent with the seed of Cain, all right, over the Canaanite. You see, because ultimately they were around during this history that you read about in Genesis, the 3rd chapter, all right, with Adam, Eve, and the serpent. You see? And when you get it, pretty much the Canaanites, as you see this title, the serpent in the garden was a Canaanite, basically, not Satan. Okay. And none of them are Satan themselves, but they possess the energy of Satan. All right. To influence mankind and to sin for prophecy to be fulfilled. Somebody has to do that. Now, when you get Genesis, the 6th chapter, the corruption, all right, of the sons of God and mankind at that time via following the works of Cain and his lineage, right? Mingling, marrying their wives, doing the same thing that our people are prone to do. All right. As you go through the volume of the book, pretty much the Lord comes to the conclusion he's going to flood the earth. All right. Now, when you deal with who survived the flood, who got on the ark, right? Genesis 7:13. In the self same day, Noah entered into the ark, him and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of the son went into the ark with them. So Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth are the ones who survived the flood. Okay, now when you get Genesis, the 9th chapter, okay, you see the mention of Canaan. All right. Genesis 9:18. And the sons of Noah that went forth of the ark were Shem and Ham and Japheth, and Ham is the father of Canaan. This is the first mentioning of Canaan. So there's no way that Canaan or the Canaanites, all right, could be the serpent in the garden. That just doesn't make sense. Now, what you can get in the spirit is that the Hamites in general, because remember, we're reading here, all right, Ham, which means what? Hum, which means what? Heat. Hum. That's where you get the word Kemetic science or Kemet. Hum. It's a Hebrew word, which means hot, like chemistry. All right. It's frictions, heat, how the elements work. But this marks the Hamites. This is where the so-called Africans come from, right? And Canaan is one of his sons. Okay, 2nd son of Noah, father of Canaan. Okay. In late usage, a collective name for the Egyptians because they were Hamites. So they would be known as Canaanites. And the Canaanites were known to possess some very dark wisdom. All right. Which pretty much what happened is after the sons of Cain were flooded. Okay. And the Lord, flooded the earth because what did he save Noah for? He saved Noah so that righteousness. Okay. Let's get Wisdom of Solomon, the 14th chapter in the GNT. This is, Solomon giving us the history on what happened with the sons of God and Noah. All right. And how idol worship, and falling after other gods led to just absolute wickedness, secret mysteries, unnatural practices. All right. Adultery, murder, harassment of innocent people. This is ultimately what Cain, all right, and his way brought into the earth at that time. Murdering of children, abortion, all of that stuff that, as we're going to show you, all of that stuff was forwarded into the earth, okay, via the Canaanites after the flood. So it says in verse 7, Wisdom of Solomon 14:7, a blessing was on Noah's wooden boat that allowed righteousness to survive. All right. But a curse is on an idol made by human hands. And this is ultimately what was happening around that time. All right. The sons of God and pretty much humanity at that time fell into idol worship. See? And the Lord brought a flood upon the earth. Okay. And after that flood, the survivors were, Noah, his wife, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. All right. And their wives. And eventually you hear about Canaan. Okay. Because after the flood, Ham, okay, was the nation of people whom the Lord would use to forward, all right, that wicked, evil philosophy into the earth, right? Remember, it was Ham's descendant, all right, as you go down to Genesis, the 10th chapter, all right, Genesis 10 and 6, and the sons of Ham, Cush, Mizraim, all right, and Put in Canaan. All right, Canaan is known as, even here, he's the fourth born. Okay, it says, and the sons of Cush, Seba, and so forth, and Cush begot Nimrod, and he became a mighty hunter. So it was through the Hamites that the Lord, okay, used this particular nation to lead a rebellion. So it was the Hamites who the Lord used to, and when you deal with Nimrod, when you deal with the Cushites, and when you deal with the Tower of Babel, it was a big rebellion, and it was led by Hamitic people. So the Hamites were responsible for forwarding evil into the earth, taking those ways of the serpent, and pretty much forwarding them into the earth after the flood. Okay, because remember, all of the sons and daughters of Cain, all right, everybody was drowned out except Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So the Lord put a spirit on Ham to continue those ways of witchcraft, and we're going to show you how we can come to that conclusion. Because Nimrod's name itself means what, right? Namrod. It means what? Rebellion or valiant. Okay. So the Lord used the seed of Ham to lead rebellions in the earth. Now, of the seed of Ham, all right, the Canaanites were the worst. All right. Remember, the Lord said, "Cursed be Canaan." Canaan was freaky from the beginning. I mean, he ultimately, what we're witnessing is those ways that came from the garden, all right, be brought back into the earth through the Canaanites. And this is why the Lord always told us to stay the hell away from those Canaanites. Okay. So what I did was I typed in here, after the flood, did the Canaanites continue the ways of the serpent? Now, of course, it brought about the serpent not being a man and, its rhetoric, because, Chat GPT is changing. Okay. They're getting a little bit more control of these platforms, because for a minute it was just exposing everything. Pretty soon it's just going to be on lockdown. But I asked, after the flood, did the Canaanites continue the doctrine of the serpent? I said, it says the biblical repeatedly shows that the Canaanite nations carried the same sins that existed before the flood. Okay, and we showed you the sins that existed before the flood. Okay, when we showed you Wisdom of Solomon, the 14th chapter, all right, it led to sexual immorality, the origin of our adultery. Okay, this comes with the philosophy of the serpent, man. This comes with doing as thou wilt. Remember what the serpent said: you should not surely die if you eat of the tree of good and evil. Okay, so there you go. Sexual immorality, verse 12, began when idols were invented. They have corrupted human life ever since they were first made. All right. Idols have not always existed, nor will they exist forever. It was human pride that brought them into the world. See that? And when it goes to the results of adultery, okay, it tells you one thing led to another. They lived in a state of evil warfare, and they called it peace. They murdered children in initiation rituals, celebrated secret mysteries, and held wild ceremonial orgies. All right, with unnatural practices, they no longer kept their lives or marriages pure. A man might kill another by the act of treachery or commit adultery with his wife. Everything was a complete bloody murder, riot of murder, robbery, deceit, corruption, faithlessness, disorder, falsehood, harassment of innocent people, ingratitude, moral decay, sexual perversion, broken marriages, adultery, immorality, the worship of idols. is basically what led to this. Okay. Sinning against the Heavenly Father. Okay. So I asked, is it safe to say that the Canaanites continue that serpent doctrine or the ways of Cain? It says the Bible repeatedly shows that the Canaanite nations carried the same sins that existed before the flood: adultery, sexual corruption, witchcraft and divination, child sacrifice, and rebellion against the Most High God. All right. These are the same types of sins that the serpent promoted. You shall not surely die. Do your own will. Reject God's commands. All right. That's ultimately what philosophy caused Adam to sin. It said this is why the Bible repeatedly warns that Canaanite practices would corrupt Israel spiritually. Deuteronomy 7, Deuteronomy 12, Deuteronomy 18. You can read those on your own time. Okay. Many of the laws that we received, like for an example, in Deuteronomy 18 and 9, when thou art come into the land of the Lord thy God, which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn after the abominations of those nations. What nations? Who was in the land? Okay, the Canaanites, the different ites, and other nations, but in particular it was the Canaanites. All right, and that offspring, that family, and they were doing all kind of wickedness. Right? There shall not be found anyone among you that taketh his son or his daughter through the fire, those different initiation rituals, or that useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or of a consulter of familiar spirits, or of a wizard, or of a necromancer. For all these things are an abomination to the Lord, and because of these abominations, the Lord thy God doth drive them out before thee. Okay, speaking of the Canaanites that was in the land, because the scriptures tell you, let's get Wisdom of Solomon in the 12th chapter. The scriptures tell you, right, the sins of the Canaanites in Wisdom of Solomon 12 and 3 in the GNT. It says, you hated the people who lived in your holy land long ago, the sins of the Canaanites, because they did horrible things. They practiced magic and conducted unholy worship. They killed children without mercy and ate flesh and blood of human beings. Okay. And many of these nations, over the years, they continue these same things, even unto this day. They were initiated into secret rituals in which parents murdered their own defenseless children. It was your own will for our ancestors to destroy these people so that the land which you consider the most precious of all lands will be a suitable home for your people. See that? So there you go. This is what they were doing. Rituals, magic. Isn't that what we showed you the serpent was doing? Okay. So it's not that the Canaanites were the serpent in the garden, but the Lord did use the Canaanites, the Hamites period, to carry these particular philosophies, all right, from before the flood into the new world. Point blank period. Okay. Again, what was the serpent? Okay, he was subtile. Okay, and we showed you how that word nachash can mean what? One who does magic, an enchanter, fortune telling. All right, and this is what the Canaanites were doing, because it was always known to stay away from these people. It was a sin. It was an abomination to be like the Canaanites. This is why in the book of Susanna, right, the history of Susanna, after those two, if you know that story, you can look it up and read it. But if you know that story, these two judges in Israel, older men, was trying to, run a train on Susanna, man. And they set her up and lied on her, and they were freaky. They were doing too much. She was married. It says in verse 56, when the first judge was led away, the second one was brought forth before Daniel. You are more like a Canaanite than a Jew, Daniel said to them, this woman's beauty has warped your judgment, and lust has corrupted your thinking. You are used to having your way with women in Israel because they have been afraid of you. But there is a woman that is a Jew, and she would not give in. And then he went in. He was talking about Susanna, but he said, you're more like a Canaanite, being freaky. See? The sins of the Canaanites. So they did carry, the same ideologies from the world pre-flood into the new world. All right. And this is why the Lord wanted us to destroy all of them. You see what I'm saying? But there's no way that the Canaanites themselves could be the serpent in a garden. All right. But they did possess that wisdom. And this is why the Lord would tell us, like in Deuteronomy 7, it says, when the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land, whither thou goest to possess it, and thou hast cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which pretty much these can all just be called Canaanites. 7 nations greater and mighty than thou. All right. Basically, it said you shouldn't show no mercy to them, make no covenant with them. Thou shalt not, make no marriages with them. It says, why? For they will turn thy son away from following me, and they may serve other gods. So will the anger of the Lord be kindled against you and destroy thee suddenly. But thus shall ye deal with them, destroy their altars and break down their images and cut down their groves and burn their graven images with fire. For thou art a holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself above all the people upon the face of the earth. So ultimately the Lord wanted us to destroy them utterly, destroy their altars, their groves. Don't make no covenant with them. Don't deal fairly with them. Don't show them no mercy, because they possessed, all right, a doctrine that would lead to us turning away from the Lord. See that? So yes, there was a point where the Canaanites did, all right, possess, all right, these different philosophies that were associated with something that came from the garden. They continued those ways of rebellion. All right. The scriptures tell you that Israel, Psalms 106, all right, because they didn't follow that command. This is the book of Psalms 106 and 34. They did not destroy the nations concerning who the Lord commanded them, but were mingled among the heathen and learned their works. The same thing that happened to the sons of God. All right. And served their idols, which were a snare unto them. And they sacrificed their sons and their daughters unto devils, and shed innocent blood, even the blood of their sons and their daughters, whom they sacrificed unto the idols of Canaan, and the land was polluted with blood. See that? So a lot of the laws that we received, all of the laws, I'll say, were to separate us from the doctrine that came with the Canaanites, the doctrine that came with these particular Hamites. The law itself was to what? All right. To separate us from the Egyptians. Okay. As a matter of fact, I believe that's in Deuteronomy 18. Let's see if I can find it. All right. Leviticus 18:3. And after the doings of the land of Egypt, wherein ye dwelt, shall ye not do. And after the doings of the land of Canaan, whither I bring you, ye shall not do. Neither shall ye walk in their ordinances. So there was always a strict, all right, hatred or a strict mindset against the ways of the Egyptians and the ways of Canaan. This is why Deacon Hakah is going to say, well, that's a fulfillment of the seed of the serpent versus the seed of the woman. No, it's not. Because the true story of that dominates the Bible is the story of Jacob and Esau. All right. And we're going to link that old serpent to the biblical Edomites and show you that that's ultimately, what's that? When you deal with the seed of the serpent versus the seed of the woman, that's Jacob versus Esau. Okay, but we are showing you that the Canaanites did possess that wisdom at one point. The Lord used them after the seed of Cain was flooded out. All right, to forward that wisdom. Okay, and it was detrimental to us. All right, that we didn't follow that commandment and just obliterate them, destroy their altars. And Jake didn't do that. Okay, because they worship their gods in some strange ways that go contrary. So the law itself was anti-Canaan. The law itself was anti-Egypt, anti-Hamite. All right. And pretty much it was the Heavenly Father reintroducing himself to the sons of Adam and giving them like a template of what Adam was doing. Okay. And what was passed down. This is how, all right, Noah understood the difference between clean and unclean, which Deacon Hakase, Noah, and them were eating swine because they didn't have a law yet, not understanding that the law was already in the earth. The priesthood was already in the earth, and it was all passed down through Adam. That's how, all right, Abel had a better sacrifice. Okay. These things were under, there was various laws that were being kept. If you read the story of the Bible before the law, statutes, and commandment, all right, were given unto Moses, because the law, statutes, and commandments, all right, were basically a reintroduction, all right, of the Most High reintroducing himself to that seed, letting them know what he deems as sin. And pretty much, drinking blood, having sex on the menstrual cycle. These are the things that the Egyptians and the Canaanites and these Hamites were doing. See that? They were just doing complete wickedness. I mean, the story of Canaan seeing his father's nakedness was an introduction into this dude's nasty. Okay, these are some nasty individuals, man. And their descendants with them. Although there came points where some of them we dealt with some of them in trade. All right, overall, at this time, the philosophy of wickedness was forwarded through that seed of Ham. All right, now where Esau is linked to this is when he came into power, all right, as the Greeks and the Romans, who did he get his system of worship from? Okay. I asked, did the Greeks and Romans get knowledge and wisdom from the Canaanites, Egyptians, and Babylonians? Okay. It says, yes, the Greeks and Romans absolutely drew knowledge, science, philosophy, religion, and technology from the older civilizations of the Near East, including Canaan, Phoenician, Egyptian, Babylonians, meaning the Mesopotamians, all right, which is where Nimrod stemmed from. All of those different myths, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Okay, those are the seed of Ham. All right, they had their writings and their philosophies, but they always had these different myths and different, things that are just far out. See, and pretty much that was ultimately a amalgamation and a culmination of the different philosophies that were forwarded in the earth after the flood. So when Esau came into power, as the Greeks and the Romans, okay, they went to Canaan, they went to Egypt, they went to the Cushites, that rebellious, Tower of Babel mentality, and they took their gods, they got their philosophy back, they got what they were going to need, all right, to finish the mission. And what spread the spirit of Satan into the earth on a whole nother level than what the Canaanites did. Okay. And we will be at war with them. All right. Throughout the majority of the remaining scriptures. It's as Jacob and Esau were born. Okay. Remember, they were both given blessings. Okay. Esau's blessing, it starts with the Greeks and the Romans. Those are the two empires on which his rulership is founded on. His beast system is rooted in the Greco-Roman Empire. We are living today in a revival of the Greco-Roman Empire. those empires leaned heavily on the philosophies of Canaan. They studied hard. Okay, they even lived as pharaohs. They took on to these cultures and ideologies. Okay, the Canaanites, known as later as the Phoenicians, were among the greatest transmitters of knowledge to Greece. The Greeks, right? Alphabet. The Greek alphabet comes directly from the Phoenician alphabet. The Romans later inherited the Latin from the Greek. Okay, the world we live in today is rooted, okay, in this knowledge, in these ways. Okay, navigation, shipbuilding. Phoenicians taught the Greeks long distance sea travel. Greek historian Herodotus credits Phoenicians with circumventing, yada yada yada, mathematicals, religion, and myth. Greek gods like Melkart is Hercules, Astarte, Aphrodite, Baal, Zeus, Jupiter. All right, in some books or some writings, Romans absorbed these gods through the Greeks, all right, and Carthaginian cultures, all right, which ultimately the Greeks got it from who? All right, the Canaanites. Okay, Greek colonization strategies resemble earlier, all right, Canaanite or Phoenician patterns. Okay, and then it goes on and on how, Egypt deeply influenced Greek philosophy, religion, science, and politics, man. Mesopotamia, all right, heavily influenced, okay, the Greeks and the Romans. Okay, on a whole nother level. Okay, Greek writers plainly say their wisdom came from these older nations. All right, Rome inherited everything through Greece. So what happened was, after the flood, the seed of Cain, they were done. So the Lord used the seed of Ham to, forward those ways from the garden that pretty much had polluted, mankind, polluted the sons of God that led to the flood. Okay, he forwarded through the Canaanites, and then eventually when the Edomites, all right, received their blessings, starting with the Greco-Roman Empire, they leaned heavily, all right, upon these particular philosophies. As a matter of fact, when you get the book of Revelation 13, right, Revelation 13 and 1, and I stood up on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. Okay, so the philosophy that will come out of this beast system, which we are living in this beast system now, are what? Blasphemies. Okay, and we have various videos where we go into this, full. We have Revelation 13 breakdowns, we have Revelation 17 breakdowns, Daniel 7 breakdowns. We go into this. All right. It says, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. All right. Meaning what? The Greeks, when you get Daniel, the 7th chapter. Okay. The Greeks represent the leopard. All right. Which is the beginning of the Edomite becoming a ruler in the earth. And you can get that history in the book of Maccabees. Okay. So the leopard represents the Greeks. So the first beast, or the beginning of this beast system, starts with the Greeks. That's why they tell you civilization began with the Greeks. And his feet were as the feet of a bear, symbolizing how Russia would be used, all right, to lead the end of this place. Going into, you can get more of that in Ezekiel 38, Daniel 2. How the end of this particular beast, all right, would be infighting, but Russia would lead a great rebellion. And Russia is actually known as the bear. That's their, country symbol. And when you look up this word bear, it means a defender. And the Lord is using Russia, all right, to defend these weaker nations in these latter days and formulate their own beast system. And out of it, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And a dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. And the dragon represents what? Okay, ancient Rome. Ancient Rome is what gave Esau his power and his seat of authority in the earth on another level. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded unto death, and his deadly wound was healed. His deadly wound was healed going into how Rome fell, but it was healed through the Renaissance, and that led to the world wondering after the beast, wondering after the philosophies of Satan, packaged up in what is known as the Renaissance, the revival of the Edomite way. Which where did they get those ways? Canaan, Egypt, Babylon. But it's interesting that it says the dragon gave him his power, because what dragon it is speaking of? As a matter of fact, let's get the book of Revelation 12. All right. Where we can just link this all to Esau. Revelation 12:3. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns. All right. And 7 crowns upon his heads. All right. And his tail. All right. 7 heads and 10 horns. Right. Which is the same thing it says about this beast. All right. That would ultimately spread blasphemy. This beast system. Okay. The 7 heads. All right. The Greeks, the Romans, Germanian Major, Germanian Minor, the Spanish. All right. The French and the British. Out of the British came Babylon the Great, as well as the small hat. See that? But that's what that's talking about. The 10 horns represent the 10 common markets. All right. Which eventually became the European Union. Okay. This gave them dominion and power on the earth, but it marked the rebirth of the ancient Roman Empire. But it also took on a lot of the Renaissance also brought about a lot of the philosophies of the Greeks. So this beast system is being saw in a vision in Revelation 12:3. It talks about a great red dragon that had 7 heads and 10 horns, right? And his head and his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven. Okay. Now, the stars of heaven can be explained here, all right, as, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, and a woman clothed, right? As a matter of fact, let's just start at 1, okay? Because it says the woman Israel, all right? What is the theme of Genesis, the 3rd chapter? The seed of the serpent versus the seed of the woman, okay? Revelation 12:1. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. All right. And that 12 stars represents the 12 tribes of Israel. The woman is Israel. Jeremiah 6. Right. And 2, I have likened the daughter of Zion unto a comely and delicate woman. The daughter of Zion being Israel. Okay. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, pain to be delivered, going into the position of the Israelites in the Roman Empire. Right. We will be in subjection. We will be vassals, which is not salvation. To be a vassal to another nation is subjection. You may enjoy particular benefits from being a vassal to that greater nation, but you aren't, you ain't in salvation. Like, the Deacon of Khan them say that the heathen being vassals unto us in the kingdom means salvation. No, that's not salvation. It means they work on your behalf. They do your bidding. But see, a vassal has their own thing going on. They can have their own form of system. No, they're going to have to follow the ways of righteousness in the kingdom. But anyway, and she, the woman, Israel, being with child, all right, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. They wanted a kingdom, right? Then the red dragon comes, and there appeared another wonder in heaven, all right? And behold, the great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. And the biblical Edomites are known as red, right? And his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, All right. The stars of heaven, all right, represents the 12 stars. The third part of the stars is what? Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. Okay. Who were in subject to the Roman Empire at this time. Okay. And did cast them to the earth, had them in slavery, servitude. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered for to devour her child as soon as it was born. All right. And what is this talking about? Okay. Now is where it gets good, because this particular dragon that stood before the woman is going into the history while we were in the Roman Empire, the fourth beast. Right. When Yahushua was born at a time where the Jews were seeking salvation and wanted to be delivered, right? You have King Herod on the earth. Okay? Matthew 2 and 3. When King Herod had heard these things, that Yahushua was coming, a star, which was the chariot, they saw he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Okay? When King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone in Jerusalem. All right, because all of the prophecies that the Jews had been, hoping for this child to be born, here came the time for it to happen. Okay. So when they heard, the particular, happening that were associated with, the chariot coming, which they call the star here. All right. They knew that it was time for this child to be born. Okay. And I'm sure it was more happening. So when Herod heard these things, he was troubled with great fear. Now, who's Herod? Real quick. Who's Herod? Herodes, the name of a royal family that flourished among the Jews in the time of Yahushua and the apostles. Herod the Great was the son of Antipater of Idumea, Edom. So this great red dragon that we're reading about in Revelation, the 12th chapter, is deeply tied, okay, to the Edomites. It is tied to the Edomites. And speaking of Edomites, speaking of the Roman Empire, because Herodians gained power, all right, of a particular province that Rome had control over, Judea, with the consent of Octavian. Okay. He was appointed king of Judea in BC 40 by the Roman Senate, all right, at the suggestion of Antony with the consent of Octavian. He had overcame great opposition, all right, which the country made him blah, blah, blah. Just like today you have the Edomites ruling here in Babylon the Great, but the Edomites in the form of the Amalekites are ruling over Judea, all right, through that beast system, which they were established through the British. So you have a similar situation happening here, where here it is, you have these Edomites, okay, who fathered the Herodian dynasty, Antipater the Idumean. Okay, and they were around in the New Testament. When you read about Agrippa, he's a descendant of the Herods. These are Edomites. Okay. So, as a matter of fact, let's get this in an NLT. So Herod was deeply disturbed. He called a meeting of the leading priests and the teachers of religious law and asked them, where is the Messiah supposed to be born? All right. In Bethlehem in Judea, they said, for this is what the prophet wrote. And they quote Micah, the 5th chapter, and I believe the 3rd verse, right? Then Herod called a private meeting with the wise men, and he learned from them the time when the chariot first appeared. It was a chariot. Okay, but it says star. It says, then he told them, go to Bethlehem and search carefully for the child. And when you find him, come back and tell me so that I can go worship him. So he's acting as if he wanted to worship him, but really he wanted to slay him. After this interview, the wise men went their way, and the star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem and went ahead and stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star or the chariot, they were filled with joy. They entered into the house and saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed and worshipped him. Then they opened the treasure chest and gave him gifts, gold, frankincense, so forth. Okay. When it was time to leave, they returned to their own country by another route, for God had warned them in a dream not to return to Herod. After the wise men were gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, flee from Egypt with the child and his mother." The angel said, "Stay there until you return, because Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." All right. So Joseph and Mary left along with Yahushua and left Egypt. Left, all right, Bethlehem, and went to Egypt. Then he eventually settled back down in Nazareth. Now, going back here, okay, to Revelation, the 12th chapter, right? You have this vision that John the Revelator has seen of this woman with 12 crowns upon her head, all right, crown of 12 stars, Israel. You have the red dragon, right, standing before her, right? Let's read this in the NLT, right? And his tail swept away one third of the stars of the sky, and he drew them to the earth. And he stood in front of the woman as she was about to give birth, ready to devour her baby as soon as it was born. So Herod wanted to do this, and Herod is the red dragon. Rome, Esau, Edom is that red dragon. Not only because it says red, but because this story is tied to Herod, whose father was Antipater of Idumea, the Edomite. Okay, the Edomites were always around. Okay, the Persian Empire. Remember what Haman tried to do to us? That's the seed of the serpent versus the seed of the woman. Okay, there's various times when we have friction with these Edomites, even from the womb. When we were in the womb, when you go to Jacob and Esau, what were they doing? They were fighting in the womb. Okay, here, the seed of the woman, Yahushua, is getting ready to be born, and they want to slay him. And she brought forth a man child who was to rule all nations. This is why Herod was scared. This is why he wanted this child dead, because this child is going to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up to God, all right, and to his throne, all right. And a woman fled into the wilderness, and this is going into history, right? And then it jumps into another point in history, right? It says, and there was war in heaven, right? Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. Now we know who the dragon is, right? Because this is speaking of the revival of Rome at the very end, where ultimately this dragon will be ruling the earth. Okay. And upon the return of the Lord, he's going to return to a world ruled, because remember, pursuant to Daniel, the 7th chapter, let's get Daniel 7 real quick. Daniel 7, it also talks about the 7 heads. So let's get that. Okay, yep, Daniel 7. All right. Right after the Greeks, it goes into the Romans. And after this, I saw in the night visions a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth, their military, their army, the Romans, and to devour it and break in pieces and stamp the residue of the feet with it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. They had a senate. How they brought in their rulers was different. And it had 10 horns. All right. They had the vassals of that day. Okay. The Goths, the Vandals, the Visigoths, Sueves, and so forth, right? And then I considered the horns, and there came up among them another little horn. So this fourth beast would be revived. Okay, this fourth beast, Rome, will be revived. And that's going to be at the end times, and this is where the Lord sets his judgment. That's why the scriptures say Esau is the end of the world. Okay, the end comes through the fall of the revival of the fourth beast, which is the revival of Rome, which marks what? Babylon the Great. See that? And this is where the Lord is going to return and send his only begotten son back along with the angels, which Michael is a high up ranking in that army. Okay, as a matter of fact, when Yahushua returns, Revelation 19:11, when Yahushua returns, and I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness doth he judge and make war. So he's coming to make war. All right, but as you keep reading this chapter, verse 19, it says, and I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. That's the war in heaven. See, and this is the time where we're going to be delivered. So Michael and his angels, all right, symbolizing the return of Yahushua, but Michael has a very, very great role within the Lord's army, because when Yahushua returns, right, when Yahushua returns in Revelation 19, he's not going to be alone. All right, Revelation 19 and 14, and the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, that he should rule them with a rod of iron. See, this is what Herod was so afraid of. He was afraid because he knew what the prophecy said concerning the return of the Lord, and how this child would ultimately be the one that would restore us, all right, back to the Heavenly Father. And this would be the child that, all right, the seed, because when you get, let's get Genesis 3. Let's read it again. Genesis 3 and 15. And I will put enmity between me, thee, and the woman. So the serpent and the woman are going to have enmity, and between thy seed and her seed, it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. It shall bruise thy head. Okay? It shall bruise thy head. All right, let's get 1 Corinthians 15. So the seed of the woman is really is fulfilled in Israel, but it's fulfilled in Yahushua. 1 Corinthians, the 15th chapter. Right? And the 25th verse. For he must reign till he have put all enemies under his feet. The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. For he, and Esau is as death, right? Okay. For he have put all things under his feet, because Esau possesses the sin. You know, he possesses the way of sin. He's the man of sin in the earth. Right? It says, for he have put all things under his feet. But he said, when all things are put under him, it is manifested that he is expected, which did put all things under him. Okay? There's another one I'm looking for. Salakia. Boom. Romans 16 and 20, and the God of peace shall bruise Satan under your feet. Okay? Shortly. The grace of our Lord Yahushua be with you. Psalms 68 and 21. But God shall wound the head of his enemies, the hairy scalp of such, all right, as goeth on still in his trespasses. Esau, Edom. Okay. Habakkuk, the 3rd chapter. When the chariots of salvation come, he says, thou winnest forth, verse 13, for the salvation of thy people, even the salvation of thine anointed. Thou woundest the head out of the house of the wicked by discovering a foundation unto the neck, Selah. See that? So this is all going to be fulfilled in Yahushua bruising the head, all right, which is ultimately the head of the seed of Satan. Okay? But really, the main point is here. Revelation 12 right? Revelation 12, right? And 7. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought against his angels. And that can be broken down in 2nd Esdras 13. And they prevailed not, neither was there any place found any more in heaven. All right. It said his sword is going to be bathed in heaven. He's going to take down their armies. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Okay. And ultimately his AI, his fighter jets, those are his angels. Okay. And they have way more. They have space stations. They have the ability to strike from the heavens, from the sky. You know, they have their different satellites. Okay. They have their host. But on the left hand side, their AI, their creations, their technology, the ability to be invisible. You know, they got that kind of technology. They got all kind of stuff. The stuff that we see is about 60 years old. So they ain't go just, we're going to need divine intervention. That's why Daniel 12:1 says that. Then shall Michael, the great prince, stand up at a time that is like never before. And that could all be, broken down in 2nd Esdras 13. But it labels this great dragon as that old serpent. Okay. And see, our people knew and understood that the serpent, when you get this word, right? Opus, it says, with the ancient, the serpent was an emblem of cunning wisdom. The serpent who deceived Eve was regarded to the Jews as the devil. Okay. A Satan, basically a Satan-like man. Even when you look up this word Satan, right? You look up this word Satan, Satanas, it says what? All right. An adversary, one who opposes other in purpose or act. The name given to, and basically who plays that out on earth more than anybody in this time? Esau. So these dudes may be coming with a doctrine eventually to tell you that the biblical Edomites ain't the white man. Okay, what do you read here? A Satan-like man. So they knew and understood that it wasn't no snake. But he's likened it to a great dragon. It started as a serpent in the garden. Now it's a great dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns. But it likens this great dragon, which we showed you is tied to the red dragon, Esau, Edom, that old serpent. Okay, the revival of Rome, who possessed the cunning wisdom of that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world. See? What he did in the garden, he was able to do throughout the whole entire planet Earth, man. Let's get a precept here in the book of Isaiah 27:1. And that day, the Lord with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent. He shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. Okay. And this is symbolizing deliverance of Israel. Okay. This is all right. Speaking in symbols and poetry. Okay. This is speaking of Esau. Okay. The ruler in the sea, which symbolizes the people. It's liking him as Leviathan because Leviathan is known as what? The king of the sea. Well, Esau on the planet Earth, all right, and his it went from a serpent to a great piercing serpent, right? And when you look up this word piercing, right, barach, fleeing fugitive. Now, who was a fugitive? Cain. The Lord told Cain he was going to be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth, man. And we finally caught up to him through Esau. Okay, because the Cain returned as Esau. The story of Cain and Abel, all right, returned into the scriptures through Jacob and Esau. Point blank, period. So he's going to slay the dragon that is in the sea, the dragon. Okay, all of these things are precepts. And there's more precepts, but, overall, this can only be received of the Holy Spirit. Although we showed you clearly, all right, that red dragon is tied to Herod, and, that's tied to the old serpent. I mean, we could even go to Revelation 20, where it talks about the old serpent being, bound for 1,000 years, going into, the time before the Renaissance period, man. This book is a history book. It's highly spiritual, but this is the thing. 1 Corinthians 2:14. But people who aren't spiritual can't receive these truths from God's Spirit. So really, it's through the Spirit that you would have to understand that Esau, Edom, okay, he who cometh to do the working of Satan, all right, is pretty much bringing back the energy of the serpent in the garden. Okay, we showed you the progression of how that information, how that doctrine, how that philosophy, was spread after the flood. All right, but in the grand scheme of things, all right, in these times, it is the biblical Edomites. All right, that's the seed of the serpent. All right, that's that great dragon, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, speaks to Esau, Edom. Okay. It all sounds foolish to them, and they can't understand it. I say so. There's people who can't receive truths from God's Spirit. You have to have the Spirit on you to really understand this. For only those who are spiritual can understand what the Spirit means. See, and these guys have lost the Spirit. The serpent in the garden wasn't a Canaanite. I don't care what angle you come from. It's just not true. It's off. And the question is, where in the hell is all of this coming from? Is some Edomite giving you a playbook to go by? What's next? Okay, what's next? All right, the big G's. So that G is associated with the whole Mason thing. Brothers brought that out. They throwing up all of these hand signs. It's getting weird. All right, but we know more is to come, and Lord willing, we'll be back with more. And again, remember, remember, man, we fit to get out of here, man. Shalom.